G'day all, it's Colin from PCTLC and thanks for joining me. In this video, we're going to be booting our USB, or USBs, which were written in Windows 10 using Etcher and Rufus. Thought it was going to be rather a simple process, but yes, once again, yeah, I can say it, we're in Linux, nothing's sort of simple, but probably this one doesn't have a lot to do with Linux. It's probably to do a lot with the type of USB that you use and probably the make of USB as well. One of the best things about making videos and sharing knowledge is actually gaining knowledge yourself. And that's what I've done, because I found out throughout this video that just depends on what USB you're using. I thought I was using two USB 3 USBs, but I think one of them was a USB 2, and I seem to have been having a bit of problem getting that to boot or getting it to show up. It will boot, but it won't show up in the boot menu, which is what this video mainly is all about, is the boot menu. So just make sure you check in the show notes. I will have a link to a website that actually explains the key or the key combinations needed to bring up your boot menu to be able to choose what you want to boot in regards to the USB, which will be plugged into the device, and you can choose whether you want to boot it at that point or not. And that's probably the easier way of booting the USB rather than changing the order in the BIOS. So that's what this video is mainly going to be all about, and discovered a few things along the way. It is filmed with my phone. I think there's probably a couple of situations where it may not focus correctly. I'm hoping most of it's okay, but that's the only way I can do this, unfortunately. And I've got 5 devices that I'm booting on. So give you a bit of a range of devices that gives you a bit of an insight as to the things needed to be done to get your USB booted, and also if it's not booting or if it's not even recognized, which was in some of the cases here. So without further ado, let's get on with booting some USBs. So this is my Toshiba laptop. We're going to start with that. This is the Toshiba USB 16 gig that was written by Rufus. So we're going to put that in the slot here. Now, normally I would have to press F12 for this computer, but since EFI is updated and it is set to EFI boot, it will pick up the USB automatically. And as you can see there, we've got Ubuntu in EFI, UEFI mode. So let's go to the UEFI firmware settings to start with, and let's just quickly check that out. In advanced, we've got system configuration, and we've got EFI and CSM selection there. I don't know whether that is a good, maybe take it back a bit, might be a bit more clearer. So that's what I'm talking about with UEFI boot and CSM boot. CSM is legacy in this case. Just press the escape key. If you see some funny things happening, it's because my keys don't work too well. Now in the, let's escape one more time. Yep, my key doesn't want to work. So if we go to boot, you can see the boot preference here, and the order of boot is USB is second and hard disk drive is first, but for some reason it just boots the USB up anyway. As soon as you put a USB in, it's automatically detected. I don't know when that changed, because it never used to be like that. It used to be press the F12 key, which is the wireless on and off for Toshiba. So I used to have to press the F12 key, but that doesn't work anymore. It probably does. Maybe in Legacy we'll find that out. So that's that. We'll just exit without saving changes. Then we'll go back to the boot. And we've got Ubuntu, as you can see, Ubuntu up there, Ubuntu. So let's boot that. I'll just skip that check because I've checked it many times already. That was Control C to skip. And there we have Ubuntu booting. So let's try Ubuntu. So that's the live desktop of Ubuntu written with Rufus. So that appears to be working fine. Now we'll shut that down. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to boot that in Legacy. See if that works. Go to the UEFI firmware settings. Now for legacy, we may have to press the F12 key, I'm not sure. So we go down here to CSM, select that, escape, exit and save changes, yes. I don't know whether we need to press the F12 key or not, soon find out. So there's no bootable disk, there's not a bootable disk in there. Don't know what that's all about. And this is what I have the problem with legacy on this computer. Well, let's try pressing the F12 key, see if that works. Now pressing the F12 key gives me the boot menu on the Toshiba, that's the boot menu, and we can boot the USB. Now we don't have an option to boot USB in legacy or in UEFI. This menu just gives you the option of booting USB. That's what the F12 key is for, so let's try that. And now it's booting. So it boots with the boot menu in legacy. So that's legacy. So we're booting in, that's Control C to skip that. All right, so it won't boot automatically in legacy, but it does boot from the boot menu. So that's a good sign anyway. And there we have Ubuntu booting up, legacy and UEFI with a USB written with Etcher. So let's shut that down, power off. All right, so now we've got our Shintaro, which was written with Etcher. So we're going to once again use the F12 key for this one. So let's do that. And there we have USB 5. I don't know what the 5 means. It's a bit weird. So we'll just press enter on that. So there we have it, booted up in legacy mode with Shintaro written with Etcher. I don't know why, but that seemed to take a lot longer to boot. I don't know if this computer's getting old. It seems to be taking really a long time to boot these days. So let's power that off. And one more time, we will press the F12 key. Now you can enter the setup mode here on legacy on this menu here, but with UEFI it gives you the firmware setting options in the grub boot, so that's always handy. Let's go to setup, and now you can see it's given me a smaller screen from legacy, which is a bit unusual, but so we'll go to System Advanced and change that back to UEFI. Exit and save changes, and then we get that menu there. Normally it's a smaller menu, but I think it's because it's just booted from legacy. Probably the next boot, if you did it again, it would probably be smaller text, I would believe. And then we can boot Ubuntu in UEFI mode. So I think I was saying that I couldn't boot legacy on the Toshiba. I didn't realise that I had to hit the F12 key, so I've learnt something with that today. I was probably just used to it automatically booting the USB in UEFI mode, because that's all I pretty much use this in these days, is UEFI mode. So I've probably over a long period of time, forgotten that you have to press the F12 key to boot the USB. So that was another successful boot, and that was Shintaro in UEFI mode, written with Etcher. So all successful boots there, written with Etcher and with Rufus. So let's shut that down and move on to the next one. Hopefully boot times are a lot quicker than this old Toshiba laptop here, which is taking forever to boot. That's the quickest shutdown I've had so far. Now what I've got here is I've got a random computer down here. That one came into my possession as an abandoned computer, and I used this keyboard on it, which came with a HP computer I've still got. So what we're going to do is turn that on. We need to change the screen to DVI because this is plugged into DVI. Okay, let's change the screen. And for this one, we will be pressing the F8 key, I believe it is, F8. Let's do that. F2 is for to enter setup mode. So F8, and this is what we get. So we are booting the Toshiba USB, and with the F8 key, this gives me the boot menu here. F12 was on the Toshiba, F8 for this random desktop computer here. So the options we got here is Toshiba USB, UEFI Toshiba USB. So as you can see, a more modern motherboard gives me the option to boot both legacy and EFI without going into the BIOS and changing the order. So this is the best way to boot your computer is this way. So I don't even have to change the mode of legacy or UEFI. It just automatically allows me to do that. So let's go UEFI first with the Toshiba, written by Rufus. And there's the boot screen there, Ubuntu, and I can go to UEFI firmware settings if I wanted to. Take a closer look at that. That's the settings there. I don't know how clear that is. This phone won't be too clear for this, but let's boot Ubuntu. So there's a successful boot with the Toshiba written with Rufus. So what we're going to do now is press the F8 key again. There's our menu back again. So what we'll do is we'll go to Toshiba USB, which is legacy mode. Let's do that. And we press enter on that. Skip the check. And there we have a successful boot in legacy mode. So let's shut that down. So 2 successful boots with the Toshiba USB written in Rufus. So we're now going to use the Shintaro written by Etcher. Once again, we're going to be pressing the F8 key. And there we have the menu there. This is the legacy menu. Says we're still in legacy. Well, actually, no, we're not. I didn't even get the option there, did I? So I must have not pressed the F8 key quick enough on startup. Let's try that again. Sometimes you've got to be pressing this key once you hit the start button on the computer. And there we go. So now we've got, there we go. Now we've got the menu. So this is the Etcher with the Shintaro. So now we've got, where are we? So it looks like we, with Etcher, we don't have the USB options here, which is very strange. Try that again. So this is what we learn by doing this is that different USBs can have different results. Now, we had no problem with the Toshiba. With this Shintaro, it looks like it doesn't want to give us the options of booting the USB written with Etcher. Now, we had no problems with the Toshiba one. So we're going to try the Etcher USB in my HP EliteBook here. So let's just check that out. So we'll turn it on. We'll press the escape key. This one is escape. And then as you can see, we've got some options here. I'm going to press F9 for boot devices. F9. And then we get the option of USB hard drive 1. So I think we're booting in legacy mode there as well. So there's a successful boot there on the HP laptop, and I'm pretty sure we're booting that in legacy. Not sure if there's a way of telling what you're booting in. Never really taken much notice of that, to be honest. I normally just boot this one in legacy anyway, but I did change the UEFI settings the other week because I haven't really messed with the BIOS on this one at all. So let's just check the BIOS settings on this one. Press the escape key. F10 for BIOS mode or BIOS setup. Arrow across to system configuration and boot options. So we go down to here. It's UEFI boot mode. So if we uncheck that, disable UEFI boot mode, accept that. Now we'll be booting in legacy. So let's do that. Save changes, yes. Exit that. Save changes, yes. And let's try that now. We should be booting in legacy mode. So the escape key, F9 for boot options. Oh, see, we're not even getting boot options now. I used to get boot options for this thing. So I think now we'll just be booting in legacy, I think. Let's just try that. Let's just let it boot. Okay, so there's another boot there. That would be in legacy mode. I'm not sure if the other one was in UEFI, must have been. Although it didn't look any different on boot up. So as you can see, these are some of the issues you can have with booting. Looks to me like Rufus is becoming the better option. So now we're going to be trying. So that was the Shintaro written by Etcher. We're just trying out. So Etcher seems to be a bit of an issue when it comes to booting. So I'm going to be trying the Toshiba, which is written by Rufus. So we'll go back into the BIOS settings and system configuration. Go back, boot options, UEFI boot mode. It's experimental. Yep. Boot order. USB hard drive is boot order. The first one to boot. So let's save that. See what reaction we get with the Rufus Toshiba USB, and let's exit that. I've saved the changes anyway. I don't know why it's asking me again, but that's press the escape key. See what we get now. F9 boot options, and there we have USB hard drive Toshiba. So I'd have to think that's booting in UEFI mode, I think, but it looks like legacy, to be honest. Okay, so there's a successful boot for the Toshiba written with Rufus. Now we're going to be checking out my Intel Skull Canyon NUC. Now this is my most modern computer. This one here uses the F10 to boot. So this one here we use the F10 key, to boot. So let's do that. F10 to enter boot setup. That's what it says on the screen, or boot menu. So press the F10 key, and as you can see, got our boot menu. Now this is the Toshiba, and there's the other screen there. It's on both screens anyway. So there's the other screen there. It's on both screens. So the options we have here is to boot USB, UEFI USB. So let's try the USB legacy mode. Toshiba was written with Rufus, and there's legacy and try Ubuntu. So there we have a successful boot in legacy mode there on my Intel Skull Canyon NUC. Not that I rarely boot legacy with this one, to be honest. It's always UEFI. So let's just do another boot. We'll hit the F10 key again, and as you'll see on here, it says F2 to enter setup and F10 to enter boot menu. There's our boot menu. We'll go to this screen here. It's our boot menu. So what we're going to do is go down to, this time, UEFI USB. And you can see that the screen is different already. There's a different screen for UEFI always. So there we have a successful boot. That's with the Toshiba written with Rufus. So Rufus has been very consistent with boot. Now we're going to be trying the Shintaro. Once again, F10 to enter the boot menu. And see, this is the problem we have again. We do not have the option of booting either with the Shintaro USB written with Etcher. So there's not even an option for the USB at all. This seems to be consistent with the writing of Etcher. I was a bit unsure about Etcher after writing it in VirtualBox because it did take a while. So I might actually try that in real hardware and see if the results are different. So if we just boot the computer and see what happens, let's just see what screen we boot into here. And it's booted into my Pop! OS screen. So it didn't boot anything at all. So far I'm not real happy with the results of the Shintaro disk written with Etcher. So now we're going to try the Toshiba written with Rufus on my Lenovo laptop. And this one here I believe is function and F12 to get a boot menu. Function F12, there we go. And then we've got Limpus Lite USB drive, and then you've got USB. So I think if it's Limpus, I believe it's UEFI, and just the standard USB is Legacy, I believe. So let's boot that. Ubuntu, yep, that looks like a UEFI screen anyway. Normally if it's Legacy, it comes up with the option of English. Normally that's a giveaway. Let's just test this theory here because it should boot up with the try Ubuntu screen or ask you whether you want to try or whatever it says. Alright, so that's my theory. It's on UEFI. It's asking you to try Ubuntu or install Ubuntu. And also you get that box around the grub, which is a UEFI thing. So they're the two ways of recognizing what you're booting in. So this is definitely UEFI. So if my theory is correct, we should get, if we switch to a legacy boot, we should get the option of English, and we'll probably get no screen asking us to try or install. So that's my theory, and we'll test that, and then we'll know what we're booting in. So there is a successful boot on the Lenovo laptop. Let's power that off. So once again, we will start up and use the function and F12 key. So hold the function key down, press the F12. There's our boot menu, Limpus Lite and USB. So this time should be legacy. And there you go, you get that option there. There's no grub menu with a box around it. So we press enter, and then we'll get the option probably of English, or maybe it'll just boot. No, it's just booting. Well, that's blown my theory because that's booted with this screen as well. So that was in the legacy mode, but it was definitely in legacy anyway. It seems to be different on all different sorts of computers anyway. I might have to do a search on how to recognize how you've booted in what mode, because I've really, to be honest, after all these years, never really given it a thought. Your computer's set to one mode and you just run with it. It's not until you do things like this you really find out the knowledge of what you need to understand what mode you're booting in. So there we go. We have booted in that mode as well. Might have to watch this back to make sure I did select the different mode. Sometimes you just never know when you're doing all this stuff. Just for giggles, we will try the Shintaro one. Let's go F12, see if this has any options at all. So believe it or not, on this computer, the Shintaro USB has options. Limpus Lite generic USB storage, USB generic USB storage. Maybe they're both the same. Maybe they both mean the same thing. Let's check that out. That is definitely UEFI because of this big white. Let's get back a bit. This big white line around here, around the grub menu, normally indicates to me that that is UEFI boot mode. So let's check that out. And we'll try Ubuntu. So it looks like we're in UEFI mode. Maybe we need to go into the BIOS of this one as well and check out what's going on in there, what we're booting with. So there's another successful boot. So we'll shut that down. That looked like legacy mode. I don't know. I'm going to check this BIOS and see what we're booting in. Function F2, I think it is. So function F2 gets us into the BIOS. Just want to have a look at what's going on there. We want to go to probably boot. UEFI first, boot priority. Boot mode, legacy support, UEFI first, legacy first. Okay, so there's the options there. There's so many different options. So let's try legacy first and see what happens there. So let's exit that. Exit and save changes. Yes, so function and F12. Function F12. And we got our USB storage. Okay, so let's boot that. Now see how you get that little thing there, and then you get English. I don't know why I didn't get English on the other one before. So that's definitely booting in legacy mode. And let's see if we get that install, try Ubuntu or install Ubuntu option. I don't think so. I think it'll go directly into a desktop. So even though I was struggling with the desktop to figure out what it was booting in and what to set it to, and the same with the little HP, because it didn't give me the options of booting. So this is the Shintaro that was written with Etcher. So that appears to be working fine on this one. It's working fine on the others. If you specifically want to boot Legacy, then you've got to set your BIOS to Legacy. All the BIOSes are different. It's just on camera, it's just too hard to figure out. I'm trying to get through these videos and to try and figure out what's going on in the BIOS mode. On some of them can be difficult, so I need a bit more time for that. So there we are, we're straight into a desktop. So if you go straight into a desktop, you're definitely on Legacy. If you don't and you get asked to try or install, you're definitely on UEFI. So the last experiment I'm going to do is I'm definitely going to rewrite the Toshiba USB with Etcher on real hardware, Windows 10, and just check out. I'm not going to boot into Ubuntu. As long as you get the boot screen, you know that it's going to boot anyway. If you don't get a boot screen, you've got issues. I'm just going to rewrite that to the Toshiba to see if we get a different reaction on these different computers. Okay, so I've got the Toshiba in here, written with Etcher. On my desktop here, F8 to get the boot menu, and there's our boot menu. So now, with the Toshiba, we have the option of UEFI, USB, and Toshiba USB. That's Legacy, and that is UEFI. So let's just check the grub screen of these. So that's definitely UEFI. Let me reboot, F8 again, F8 key, and then we've got Toshiba USB, which should just bring up select English or whatever, because it'll be in legacy mode, I believe. And there we go, and then we press enter. So that is the legacy screen, and the previous one was the UEFI screen. Let's shut that down. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm suspecting that this Shintaro here, this is the Shintaro, I'm suspecting possibly that's USB 2. I thought it was USB 3, but probably not. But definitely the Toshiba is USB 3. Written with Rufus and Etcher, I get the same results. This one written with Etcher, yeah, I don't get the multiple selections on the boot menu with this Shintaro written with Etcher. So this has worked out well and a good little experiment. Now this Toshiba seems to be doing all right. Now the ones that I've had real good success with is the SanDisk. I don't know if that's clear or not. So the SanDisk writes really well. I never have any issues, especially with, I don't think that's clear. Especially with Ventoy, SanDisk works really well. So I've got a few SanDisk ones. This one here, this is an ADATA, so I use that for mainly just swapping data from computers. So that's what I use that for. I don't really use that for booting, but I think I have in the past and it was never a problem. So this appears to be the problem. You've got all of these are USB 3. That's a USB 3, I know. USB 3 and USB 3. This one must be USB 2. Although some people do put their own colors on, even though they're USB 3, some people do put their own colors. But this is the problem you can have if you're not successful with Etcher or Rufus. Just try a different USB, because as you can clearly see, it can be a problem. So for the purpose of the video, I'm going to be just saying what this is. It's Toshiba, written with Etcher, so I know. Function F12 for this one. We have Samsung SS, that's my hard drive. So we have Toshiba there and Olympus Light Toshiba. Let's just check out what the Olympus Light gives us. So that is definitely a UEFI screen without a doubt, that one there. So let's shut that down and let's reboot that. Function F12 for the menu, function F12. Now that was Olympus Light. Let's just try the USB and see what that gives us. And that is given us the legacy boot, which we select English and so forth. There's the two working on that laptop there, and that was written with Etcher. So you get different results with different USBs, there's no doubt about it. And I've heard people say that, and it is true. All right, so Toshiba again, written with Etcher. And we are going to see what results we get with my HP laptop. Let's press Escape. F9 for boot options. We get Toshiba USB. Let's just check that out. And that is booting in legacy mode. Now I think I might have changed that to legacy mode. Let's just shut that down. Let's just check that. F10 for BIOS setup. Now we go to system configuration, boot options. What are we booting in I thought we're booting in UEFI mode. Legacy boot. So that's booting in legacy. So let's escape and escape. Save changes, no. Let's just have another look at that. F9, escape and then F9. Oh yes, so I forgot about this one. That one there. Let's see if we can get closer on this. So that one there is legacy. This one here is boot from EFI file. And then we press this one here. Then we go to EFI. Then we go to boot. And then we go to boot 64 EFI. Continuing to boot and there's our EFI mode. So I totally forgot about how this one works when it comes to EFI. You've got to select that EFI boot mode, and that's what I forgot with this computer. So that's now booting in EFI. And I just thought I'd boot this one to confirm that yes, we get the try or the install Ubuntu. So definitely that's in EFI mode. So now we're back to the desktop computer. Let's stick the Toshiba back in there. F8 to boot. And this is the Toshiba written with Etcher. And there we have Toshiba USB. Maybe I'll go back a bit on that so it doesn't look clear. Toshiba USB and UEFI Toshiba USB. Let's do that. The UEFI. And there we have the UEFI screen. That typical screen with the line around it, as you can see, with the grub menu options there. So that's your typical UEFI screen. F8 again, and if we go down to just the Toshiba USB, that should be legacy mode, and enter that, and that should bring up that little man. And if you take too long to enter that, it will just bypass this selection. So just reboot if you missed it, because if I took another few seconds, it wouldn't give me the option when entering. It'll just go straight through to desktop. So that's what happens there. So that's your legacy mode. So Toshiba laptop, I didn't have to touch any keyboards. The Toshiba laptop came up with the menu straight off the bat. And there's our UEFI with the line around there with the grub selections. So that's the UEFI boot. And while we're in here, let's go into the firmware settings on this one. And we go to advanced. If I can get my keyboard to work correctly, system configuration. And we'll put that on CSM and escape that. And exit that, saving changes. And then now it should boot. I think I have to F12 that. And F12 brings up the boot menu, and then we've got the option of Toshiba. Let's do that, and then we'll enter very quickly on that, and then we get the option. Now we're in legacy. So that's how that works. So if I turn that off, and if I hit I think it's the F2 key for setup, or I can hit the F12 key. Oh, there's the setup. So the setup, as you can see, is a lot smaller in the legacy mode. So we'll go to advanced, system configuration, back to UEFI, which is what I use this in mostly anyway. UEFI, escape that, exit that, exit saving changes. So we're back in EFI mode. I don't have to hit any keys. The USB, if there's a bootable USB in there, it'll just boot automatically. So we're back to back to the Intel NUC. We've gone full circle. So I'll start that up. So F10 to enter setup, and you will see the menu come up on screen. There it is there in the right-hand corner, top right-hand corner. There's our boot menu. This is the Toshiba written with Etcher. So we've got USB Toshiba and UEFI Toshiba. So that will be our EFI boot. Let's just check that out. And there's our typical screen with the line around it with the grub menu options. So let's shut that down and let's boot that one more time using F10. And there's our boot menu. Now if we hit USB Toshiba, that should be just legacy. So let's enter that and we should get that little man on the bottom of the screen there, or whatever it is. Yeah. Hit enter and our option for English. So that's legacy mode. And that's it for this video. I'd have to think that that's probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks, or one of the biggest hurdles within this series, was getting through all the booting of the USBs. I genuinely thought that I'd grabbed 2 USB 3s, but I actually had grabbed a USB 2. And that's probably a bit of a blessing in disguise, because I didn't realize that I was going to get that type of reaction from a USB 2. If everything had have worked out really well and there were 2 USB 3s and both Etcher and Rufus yielded the same results, then really we wouldn't have had nothing gone wrong, and we wouldn't be finding out that USB 2 can be some sort of issue when booting on some devices. Definitely that threw me a bit when the menu came up and there wasn't even a USB on there. That was on the desktop one and the NUC as well. It should have worked on the HP with both. I was just confused. I haven't rarely used that BIOS or been into that BIOS. I just boot in Legacy every time since I've had that thing for a number of years now. And I'd completely forgotten about that EFI and select that. And it threw me even more when when I turned it off, no selections came up on screen at all. These are the things that can go wrong, but hopefully if you have a reasonable USB 3 stick, then you should be fine with booting those things. Any Linux distro, I'd have to think, really, at the end of the day. And like I said in the video, I think I've had good success with SanDisk. They seem to do very well. Also that Toshiba one, and probably the ADATA I've used before, but not a lot of booting with that, but I have done it and I had no issues with that one either. Sorry the video wasn't up to a really good standard. Probably was in some parts. It's the only way I can do that, and I really want to get the message across to people how to boot the USB on your computers, laptops, PCs, whatever they are. So people have a general idea, and the error that came up with the USB 2, I think that was a good thing. It's good that I picked these random USBs and I didn't actually check, so me being lazy has worked out to be to give some good knowledge to people, the issues you can have booting USBs. So that's the booting your Linux distro video done. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you found it interesting and informative. And I shall see you in part 4, resizing the disk in Ubuntu 20.04.2.